IVM.
I know I like to win prizes and rewards. You do as well? Then just download Cred and pay your credit card bills on it, and you could win some epic prizes, rewards, and cashbacks. Don't miss out. Just download Cred.
We're obviously in a pandemic, right? And Plug has about 2,000 creators who are health creators. Okay, this is my favorite part, right? I'm seeing doctors who are hesitant to even do a tweet on social media. They are telling stories which are getting millions and millions of views across all platforms. And it's in the middle of a pandemic. I think this new story, which we've released very recently, where Dr. Sparsh is talking about how you need to get vaccine, he shows you the whole process in a hospital. And you're totally hooked on to doing it, right? And it's amazing to see health creators. And because doctors were the biggest challenge that we've faced when we were enabling communities, right? And now they're the need of the hour. Every doctor is heard from a credible voice. And if you're able to establish it as your social identity, not only on Plug TV, but on every platform, it's amazing.
Hello and welcome to the Filter Coffee Podcast. There is so much buzz about the creator economy globally as well as in India. Some studies say that there are more than 50 million people today who make a living as a creator on the internet globally. However, this is just the 1% of the internet population who are, in a way, privileged enough to build content, become popular, and also to generate revenue from that. My guest today is Tamseel Hussain, who is the founder and CEO of a platform called Plug TV. Plug is an acronym that stands for People Like Us Create. It is one of the greatest ideas in the creator economy that you probably never heard of. And just like the name suggests, it's quite revolutionary, almost utopian. Tamseel dreams of a world where he can build a platform that can make the remaining 99%, the disadvantaged, the non-urban, the young, just regular people become creators and actually earn money from it. In other words, an economically viable creator ecosystem that is for the people and by the people. Sounds unbelievable? Let me tell you something even more outlandish. He is actually doing this as we speak. Plug TV is a revenue positive startup today that is sustaining an ecosystem of more than 30,000 creators across 15 different languages. From rag pickers to self-help women groups, to subculture artists, to gaming enthusiasts, to doctors who are vaccinating people and telling those tales in the front line, to communities in Sikkim who are creating content around how a toilet has revolutionized their village, and many, many more. You might have even seen some of this content on platforms like Snapchat and NDTV without ever coming across the term Plug TV, thanks to a brilliant content syndication model he has created. I want to speak to Tamseel about this vision in more detail and also speak to him about how the various things he had done in the first 15 years of his career kind of helped shape him to become the kind of entrepreneur he is today. Welcome to the Filter Coffee Podcast, Tamseel. Tamseel, I spoke about Plug TV in the introduction, but that really is not even your first experiment with communities and movements. I believe for you, the story probably started with a very, very interesting experiment you did in the Sector 17 market in Chandigarh. Talk to us a little bit more about that to begin with.
Sure. I think before I started Plug, I was experimenting with a lot of communities, right? Be it online and offline. And Chandigarh was something which is very close to my heart, specifically because I spent a lot of time in researching on what placemaking is, right? Which means how do human beings engage with the space, right? Be it a market, like you walk through a market, you walk through a street, you walk through anything else. You really want to see why you're slowing down while walking, right? So a lot of the research that I did was around that. And Chandigarh has been one of my favorite cities. So this architect friend of mine, Rahul Sabarwal, got in touch with me. And he's like, hey, we're redoing this market in Sector 17. And I would love to use your expertise. I was like, what will I do? Right? I'm not an architect by profession. But he said that you're a public engagement expert, right? You love engaging communities and building communities. So when the Chandigarh project happened and I was able to experiment with placemaking. Now, the biggest challenge over there was that a lot of people, if you go to check the 17 market in Chandigarh right now,
Before I go into that, what is placemaking? What does it mean?
so placemaking is a technique where you basically engage people with the public space, right? And you make sure the places are built in a certain way, which are people first, right? Which means that markets, be it malls, be it roads, be it anything that you see, how can these spaces be people first and not, let's say, business first or not other things? Like, how do you make sure, for example, if you have this beautiful market, right, and you have an empty back alley, and you want to convert that empty back alley into, let's say, a skateboarding ground where young people can come and engage with and practice skateboarding, and it suddenly enhances a culture that exists in a small area which never used to exist before. So it's just like getting together of people in public spaces and using public engagement techniques within that.
Hmm.
So when Chandigarh happened, and I was talking to Rahul, and he had this beautiful design in place, and he was working with the administration in Chandigarh for about 2 years. If you know Chandigarh, it's designed by Corbusier. It's a beautiful city, even right from how trees are designed there. They're designed in a way where all around the year you see shade, right? Be it summer, winter, you can walk and you can run through the city. And it's so beautifully designed. I think one thing that a lot of people don't know is that every manhole, like every like hole that covers we call it the nala, the sewage, has a Chandigarh map on it, which actually tells you where you are so you can navigate through the city. So the whole city was built keeping a people first perspective in mind. And Rahul had this vision for the new market, which is very eco-friendly, very sustainable, how a lot of people can come back to the market. So when I started doing the placemaking work around that, during the research phase, I found out why people have shifted to a mall than a market, right? It was created as a citizen center when the city was started, when it was built by Corbusier. And a lot of people have obviously shifted to what's popularly known as L&T Mall, right? Which is the Elante Mall. Everybody wants to go there. It's an air-conditioned mall, beautifully made. Now, when Rahul started doing it, the first thing that they came up with, what all of us came up with, was how a subway can connect it to a leisure valley park and how that walking subway can be green and engaged, right? How the Sector 17 market can be covered in bicycle tracks and how people can engage. When you do that, you really need to know that how around the year, what can the administration do to make sure that young people keep coming back to the market instead of going to the mall? So it was like a beautiful placemaking experiment. And when you just simply Google placemaking, you realize that a lot of young people, especially a lot of architects who are coming up now and who are experimenting with public spaces, the first thing they really do is placemaking. And one such movement, which all of us are slightly aware in our own cities, is also called Rahagiri. I don't know if you've heard of it. Rahagiri is a movement where there's this whole rally which comes out and you want to reclaim the public space that you have. So asking people to reclaim it in various ways. So in a way, when you add placemaking to an architectural design, it really helps people reclaim the space and use it in a way where they find it home and they want to engage with it and they get happy and it increases the happiness of the city.
So what happened in Sector 17? What did you guys set out to do? What did you do? And how did that change people's behavior?
So the first thing I think where our vision was to see how young people can come back to the market, right? And in order to do that, we had to talk to all the shopkeepers there, all the merchants who are there, people who've been running shops for about years. We had to talk to a lot of people who've occupied the market in a way to sell a lot of the stuff that they do, right? When you enter the market, you see this beautiful big market and you walk in and what we realized from the existing user behaviors, people only came to that market because of historic relevance, right? Which means that if you have a suit or a pant that you want to get stitched, you would come and do that. You would park your car, you would walk to the shop and come back to your car and go back. And if you want to engage with the market or something which is informal and you want something nice and fresh, you would go to a mall, right? So in order to change this, right, it's one of the largest markets that exists, right? And the first thing that from a strategic lens, which I think these guys did was that they wanted to connect the market to the Leisure Valley Park, right? Like an area of the market, which they identified as a space where people, if they are walking through the market, they should be able to walk through Leisure Valley and they should be able to walk back to the market, right? to create this beautiful bridge, which looks really aesthetic, where once the bridge was built, it took a long time to build it. The idea was to see how events, what people need to do, what all are these things to do to make sure that people can start using that bridge. But what was beautiful to see as soon as the bridge was like created, people were starting to use the bridge on their own a lot because they saw this as a problem that they were facing, right? It was a solution that said that, oh, I can actually walk to a market in a very popular area like Leisure Valley Park, and I can walk from the market to Leisure Valley Park. It's a problem that was solved, right? But what happened was the way it was constructed and the amount of like greenery around the bridge, you started noticing that the space, which is a new space created, right? Which was targeting young people, you actually saw a lot of young people coming organically and hanging out there, right? Simply informally engaging with the space and trying to do things which they love. So in this case, it was rollerblading and skateboarding, and you saw a lot of this new kind of culture which had a space, right? So when you even look at in cities like Delhi or Bombay, right, a lot of experiments done like this are, for example, in Bombay, you have this really, really small skating rink, which is in front of the car social, which is in car. They've built a small rink
Right.
where you see people from all classes, right, come and skateboard together. It doesn't matter what economic class you belong to. If you love skateboarding, you do it, right? And this culture was the inspiration of seeing how, with beyond classes, people engage with the space and creates an equal opportunity for being, no matter if you're rich, if you're poor, if you have access, if you don't have access, if you can easily walk, if you can't easily walk, how does it create that equal opportunity? And that's what placemaking as a goal does. It's like keeping all stakeholders in mind and making sure they're able to use it in a very engaging, informal way where they treat it as home.
So going back to the problem you're trying to solve,
Yeah,
you're getting people to spend more time in the market and by extension Leisure Valley by building
exactly.
this bridge, so that they spend less time in malls and more time in a place like this. And what you're saying is that the way people owned it by skateboarding and creating their own culture in the space, it became more an organic thing, right? So I'm
Exactly.
assuming that was your objective, right?
Yes,
You
that was the
created
learning.
this. Hmm, amazing. What did you take away from that in terms of user
So
behavior? I'm not necessarily saying you applied that in Pluck, but what did you take away from this entire experience?
So when we look at this project as a whole, which is still ongoing, because it was just the 10% of the project which was done, which was the bridge, and now the whole market reconstruction is happening to see how you take that engagement point where young people are finally able to own a part of that market. How can they spread it through the market and start coming every day? Which means there's a different way of engagement and architecture that had to be thought through, right? One of the biggest takeaways that I got out of this was one, that the public space process is really long, right? It takes a very, very long time to create a placemaking experience, right? There are lots of smaller placemaking experiences, but in such a case, it takes a long, long process. The second thing I realized, in a world like today, in a country like India, young people are consciously always wanting to try new things, always wanting to be a part of a new culture, right? Always wanting to express themselves. And this experiment really taught me something very beautiful, that it's just a space, if you look at it. It's a space which on paper was designed to engage young people, but young people adopted it themselves, right? And if you have a new culture and if you have a new offering, which they can really claim, and not only just claim, but get benefits out of, not only from a lens of creating a positive impact, but also from a lens of gaining independence and gaining that confidence of expressing themselves. That's one of the biggest learnings I took, like how a simple space can help young people talk about their culture, identify themselves in a way, and engage, even if it's just for that half an hour, 1 hour, but they go back home learning something new, right? And that really took me a lot. It taught me a lot when it came to designing Plug, right? Specifically in a way of how a community, how one person, how one creator, how people who don't know the talent that they have can form a culture which doesn't exist and claim it
Fascinating.
and grow in it.
Tamseel, we started almost midway into your career with the Chandigarh experiment. You're someone who has had a wide variety of professional experiences. You were in advertising very briefly, I guess, but mostly you built a career of working in non-profits for more than a decade before you turned an entrepreneur with Plug TV. Talk to us a little bit more about your formative years.
So, I mean, I've been working for almost 15 years, right? 15 to 16 years, I think possibly longer. I started working, my dad had this travel business, right? Where I got a lot of opportunity to travel ever since I was a child. Like I've been traveling ever since I was 10. And every time I used to travel, I used to learn something new about myself. The first thing I ever learned at the age of 10 was that, hey, I have real anxiety issues, right? How do I deal with knowing who I am? Like I used to have this funny walk when I was a child, right? Because I was tall, I was skinny, and I was like, oh, I don't know if that's the right thing. So while traveling, I realized, oh, wow, there's the outer world out there.
What kind of places did you guys travel to?
So we used to go to a lot of these small hill stations, be it Khajiar, be it Manali, be it a lot of these hill stations. My dad used to run these campsites, right? In Barot, he used to find these new places and convert them into campsites and change the way a small village would look like by promoting sustainable ecotourism, where people would come and engage, which are mainly students in nature.
If you don't
So
mind me asking, what did your dad do?
So my dad ran a travel business, right, which was
Ah,
specifically on education, right? How schools can travel across the country, across the world, exchange ideas. And it was mainly around that. So it was more of a travel agency, but very focused on education.
wow.
So a lot of my learnings as growing up was about traveling with my dad, learning how to do business from him, having these emotions which I have never felt before, which is being like, oh, there's this big bad world out there and my teenage problems are very small, right? Or finding people who are struggling and challenging and getting involved in a lot of stories that they were doing while being on there, right? Like when you start climbing a mountain, it's this beautiful experience. You learn how to wear, what kind of gear to wear, what kind of shoes to wear. And you actually learn how to, like, if you do bouldering or rock climbing, it's very difficult, right? As a teenager, when you're learning it for the first time, you really have to fight your fears, where you have to see where you need to put the right foot, how you need to hold the boulder, who's training you. And a lot of dependence comes on the instructor who's helping you do it. Without that,
Hmm.
you would never think of conquering that fear. The same thing goes when you rappel down the same mountain. And it's this beautiful learning that every trip I've done with dad, it always used to have a new kind of learning. And slowly, as we started growing up, I started participating in his business where I started understanding how he runs the business, right? So I used to be really excited about summer vacations and winter vacations because I used to get a chance to get connected with my dad in that business, right? And I remember at the age of 21, and I started doing a lot of these internships with advertising agencies to learn what my skills are. Never worked out, right? It never worked out. We were never meant to be together. Advertising agencies and Tamseel were never meant to be together. I was a very different kind of a creative when it came to that because
Why do you
advertising
say that?
agency, advertising agencies have this beautiful culture of coming up with an idea very quickly.
Hmm.
At that age, when I did the internship, I could never understand that concept, right? I was more of a poetic creator where I would write short stories and fictional stories and go into a lens where I would be able to write better there. But if you asked me to write a copy, I would take a longer time. And it was an interesting journey. It was like about a 2, 3 month internship, I remember. But what took me to Oroville, right? And I remember one of the biggest and the most beautiful life changing experience was about 2 years that I spent in Oroville after college. I mean, Oroville as a whole area is a human made forest on a land which didn't exist. And people have built businesses from about more than 44 countries there. So spending 2 years there, it was just like this experience which really taught me of how connected you are to your planet and how if you're connected to your planet, how you can build amazing sustainable businesses that can actually travel further, right? And can really change the way things look. Be if you I remember there's this architect there called Swadam, right, who was able to create a new kind of an arc, right? Arcs that you see on buildings, which a lot of buildings in Dubai have, which use his arc. You would never know that, right? He was one of the core architects of Matri Mandir in Oroville.
Oh,
And I got a chance to experience a lot of what sustainable lifestyle is and how work can incorporate in it. Once I left Audible, I knew only one thing to do. I started running after Greenpeace because I wanted to work and save the planet. And I chased them for about, I think, 3 months, 2 to 3 months. And finally, they gave me this job to do my first big project, which was around Age of Stupid, right? It was a film on how in about 2200, the whole world has been finished and how our stupidity is leading to climate change, killing the whole world. And I had to organize this one screening where I think these are a lot of these learnings that after Greenpeace, I realized that I wanted to travel. I spent about 2 years in Egypt, again, working on educational exchange with my dad. I went back to his business, and all these experiences taught me a lot of things.
Hmm.
Where the big changing moment that came in was when change.org, which is a tech platform or a nonprofit, was launched. And I got the similar feeling which I got when I was after someone to give me a job in Greenpeace, which was change.org. And it was this crazy concept of how online petitions can mobilize and create change. And at that point in time, everybody used to look at online petitions as just online signature campaigns, which really lead to no impact. So I was the first one they recruited in India, for which I was stationed for about 3 years, where I learned a lot about how a startup works, right?
Hmm.
And how a product like as simple as an online petition can transcend the way how movements are built, right? How people use petitions to not only save lives or how not to get something that they want in their hostel canteen, to about big moments about how things like acid need to be banned in India. And these were some of the amazing campaigns that I got a chance to work on,
Hmm.
where the biggest shift that in my strategic thinking or in my career happened, how movement building is a very strong form of a business. When you build movements to rally people around the products that they love, you are able to really not only convince people that is helping them, but at the same time, you get a chance to help them grow with the product.
Hmm.
And the use cases you get are very different. So you would have so many amazing stories in change that it really taught me a lot on how movement building can not only result in running a business, earning profits, but at the same time, giving people what they want and love.
I think in some way, all of these experiences, whether it is, your time in advertising or at Auroville, or with all of the different not-for-profits you have worked in, whether it is Greenpeace or from a product perspective at change.org, I'm sure all of them have contributed to the kind of an entrepreneur you are today. But coming back to Pluck TV itself, we were speaking about this earlier, and you told me that the idea came to you when you were standing on a landfill with some partners from Instagram and from Hindustan Times and another NGO you were working with at that point in time. Talk to us a little bit more about what was behind that story.
So I think at that point in time, Instagram as an organization was hadn't introduced the story format, and they were just about to introduce it, right? They just
Okay.
introduced it very recently. So they wanted various people to test out the storytelling format, right? So I was lucky to find them who agreed to actually engage in that project. And Hindustan Times was the only platform who at that time had a mobile journalism team, right? Where you had people who were promoting this whole idea about mobile journalism in general, right? And connecting these two, like a massive social media platform and people who tell amazing stories with Hindustan Times and having this community, which was managed by a small nonprofit called Chintan, just connecting all these three of them to see if people who are just hungry to tell a story, right, to their readers in a certain format, to see a platform who wants to see how people are using the new tools, to a community who has no idea what this impact would do, right? It's this blue ocean, right? Completely. They're like, why are these guys? Why? Based because I think the first question they're like, why are we getting trained here, right? They wanted to learn social media skills. They're like, okay, I get this. How will it help me? So the first story that I remember noticing the first story, and it was amazing to see how easy it was to train them because it's all visual in nature, right? And the first story they created was, hi, my name is XYZ. I'm located in this area, which is the first step of every mobile storytelling that you even do at Pluck, right? Where you need to talk about your location and who you are. The second story that they did was when they came back in the evening after work, you could see them on stories and videos that they had just got their phone and they were like, I want to show you where I live, right? I'm going to show you what I do. I'm going to show you what my business is. This is a landfill. This is how we do it. And they were explaining it to audiences that they didn't have. And they started building a community around it through these stories, right? And it was just them living their lives. And for people, it was like, wow, okay, waste makers are telling stories. At that time, as I mentioned, there was no TikTok. So on Instagram, it was very hard to find stories like this. It was almost impossible to find stories like this. You would usually find stories about lifestyle or funny things or entertainment, but you would never look at, oh, a waste maker is living their life, right? Unless you're a nonprofit and you're talking about a community. But whenever a nonprofit talks about their community, they talk about it from their brand perspective. What these waste pickers are doing is, regardless of the brand they belong to, regardless of who they're supporting to, they were talking about their life and their personal story themselves to an audience which they had just started building. What I personally wanted them to do was build a community and sell and get more opportunities of selling waste or buying waste and earn more revenue out of it, which is one of the biggest learnings that happened, which is what led to the birth of Plug, right? These waste pickers were never able to do this. They were able to run a very amazing campaign on, I think, which was powered by Chintan quite a bit. They worked very strongly with these waste pickers and the new skill that they had learned on storytelling to build a movement of waste pickers. Because at that time, I think GST was launched and e-waste and waste had massive GSTs. Imagine a waste picker paying GST after going through all the hardships of collecting waste. So they were able to get that off. And I think Mr. Arun Jaitley was there where they raised a campaign, they wrote a lot of letters, and they were able to get that. One of the first impacts of that storytelling workshop was that they were able to get rid of GST on the products they were getting, right? And it was amazing to see how they were able to mobilize by telling stories.
You mentioned how this gave you the inspiration for Plug.
Yes.
Talk to us a little bit about that. Yeah.
When I saw the gap between waste pickers excitedly telling their personal story, receiving likes, not as many, but not being able to generate revenue or even using it to their advantage, that's what really led to the birth of Plug. What I realized was that Instagram as a platform at that point was all about certain kinds of users, right? Facebook is all about certain kind of users. All these platforms have a very different way of looking at users. And we had this opportunity of giving birth to new kinds of creators, right? We used to use the term creators. At that time, creators was never a popular term. It was influencers, right? So people like us create, Plug creators, people like us create equals creators. And to give and engage and build a community of creators who don't get opportunities enough to tell their amazing stories. And in order to not only just tell their amazing stories, they could get a revenue for it without dependent on platform ads, right? Without waiting to get about XYZ followers to be able to earn that revenue.
I think the model that a YouTube today follows is very clear, right?
Hmm.
A creator creates content, there is a great audience for it. And because there is a great audience for great content, brands want to tap into that audience and brands invest money in YouTube, which YouTube shares with the creator, right? Now, in your model, if you want to share the revenue, if you want to make monetization easier for the 99%, then they need to find a way to be able to monetize the content, right? Whether it is by building an audience or by some other means. How can a creator monetize the content on Plug today?
So when we look at it, Plug was formed at a moment when there was, and during our journey, a lot of content platforms which focus on content discovery have come up across the country on various natures or various genres of content, right? And on Plug, a creator monetizes content specifically. There are two things, right? One, through other platforms that their stories get published on, depending on the reach and all those things that the community has achieved.
So
And
is that like content syndication? Like, can you give an
yes,
example of these other platforms?
Snapchat being one of them. Snapchat Discover having free shows which are engaged on certain kind of audiences, right? You have one show which only engages art audiences. You have one show which only engages sustainability audiences.
And does Snapchat pay for this content from Plug
Yes,
TV?
I mean, we earn through ads on Snapchat, right? Every
Wonderful.
episode, and that's how it works. The second and the biggest revenue stream that we have right now is we work with a lot of donor agencies and institutions who want access to amazing content that doesn't exist. So these are media platforms, donor agencies, institutions who constantly want content, and they get an access to a new kind of a creator community and new kind of creator content that they don't have access to.
So you mean like donor agencies who support NGOs, etc., right? And you also mentioned media platform. What kind of media platforms are they?
So you have broadcast media platforms who pick up stories which they can't get, to about a lot of other digital platforms, publications who want stories in certain areas that they don't have access to. You have institutions, you have donor agencies, you have non-profits, you have smaller restaurants who have engaged with a lot of creators because they want access to it. And it's amazing to see the kind of stories they get. I'll give you one such examples, right? One of the things that went out on Pluck, right, which was a gig, we released like a gig report where we ask people to apply for these gigs in whatever areas they are. And when this amazing project, which when we realized that the model is working flawlessly and at a speed which is unimaginable, was there was a brief that came in where there was a gig that came in where about 8 to 9 stories were needed on how toilets are changing lives in India, right, in various parts of the world. In various parts of the country, be it the smallest of the towns to biggest of the cities, in about 48 hours, like our creators were able to tell these stories, release them, distribute them, and it went out and across all the platforms. These are stories which require a higher level of production. These are not just stories that you can, in a short form content, use your phone and tell, right? These are stories which are between 2.5 minutes to 3.5 minutes, well produced with great audio quality, which comes in the middle of, let's say, it's before an OTT like an Amazon, Netflix, and after your Instagram and Snapchat stories, which are not premium in nature, right? Which are your simple videos that you post on YouTube as well. These stories come in the middle of that, which is a short form content, which is slightly longer than a short form content and lasts between 1.5 minutes to about 12 minutes. That's the length of every video story episode that comes out on Pluck, right? So that's the space that we're in. These stories were able to source from like the smallest of villages in UP. I remember we had an ASHA worker who was shooting the story, right, on ground. And because she had bad internet, she actually had to go up the hill, get internet to transfer the footage and come back in. This is before the big data drive came in India where everybody had internet at such scale. She used to walk up the hill, transfer the footage, transfer and like upload all the videos she has shot and go back in. And there was a feedback coming on the story, right? Because she used to come back, go back on the hill and come back and shoot the story again. These stories were released, published on Plug TV and the partner platforms that we have. In about the next day, they were able to receive the money for the stories that they told. And hence, it was like this monetary model that they didn't expect that they would get.
Where did they receive monetization for the story from? Was it also on one of the
On Plug? No, you can just simply submit an invoice on Plug TV and get your money for the story that you've done.
Okay.
Right, once it's published. Once your show is live and a brand is supporting your show or an institution supporting your show, you get a chance to do it. So you can either go do it via applying for gigs, or you can simply do it because you want to, because a brand loves the work that you're doing. As a creator, you get access to that, and you are able to have these transactions on the platform itself.
That's amazing. So today, instead of waiting to hit 1 million, views on a YouTube or anywhere else, and then partake on that trickle down sort of a revenue, someone can create money and actually use Pluck as a revenue stream, right? Do you have creators who entirely depend on Pluck for as a source of revenue or as a source of livelihood is what I meant?
We have case studies where people for 6 months, the only livelihood source they were getting was telling stories on Plug TV. Wow. All right. This is in the last lockdown that happened where everything was shut. All jobs were shut, where you couldn't go and record stories. You couldn't go and do a job. So people were telling stories and earning revenue in the last lockdown that happened. And continuing to add a completely new kind of trend on Plug, where you continue to do it. So when you ask us, this is the only livelihood they have, I would say no. But was it a main source of livelihood during the lockdown? I would say yes, right? And that's something, even like, I think when the migrant crisis happened in lockdown one, a lot of migrants who were going back to their states, imagine they were telling their stories, right? Now, they didn't use it as a full livelihood, but they were able to really make sure their stories were heard and they were able to get closer to monetizing opportunities that they could than ever before, right? But mainly, the last lockdown did generate amazing opportunities. I mean, these stories really made me believe how powerful the platform is. For 6 months, someone's main livelihood was by telling stories on Plug TV, and it was just amazing to see that thing. A
It is
person
beautiful.
told
Yeah.
about, I think they released 30 episodes, and one of the shows got a Van Infra award called COVID Hero. Yeah.
In fact, that leads me to my next question to you is, um, for me, the first time I got to know about Plug TV and the kind of work that you do was when I was looking at the Van Infra South Asian Digital Media Awards, which is one of the very prestigious awards out there for media and journalism. And when I was looking at winners of the television channels and the big print publishers of our time, there was this small company called Plug TV which was winning awards there as well. Right? My question has two parts. One is what you're doing also has a significant, well, we're calling it as content and the creator community. It also has a significant impact on journalism. In a way, it is very, very high quality journalism in itself. And B, how has the recognition been for what you do across global communities?
So I think it definitely has an impact on journalism. As I mentioned, that the ecosystem that we were taught, right? Our storytelling team is aged between 20 to 24. Our tech team is young. Everything is really, really young. These are passionate people who want to use new means of mobile storytelling and break down the stuff they've learned into the tech that Pluck is providing, right? It does have an impact on journalism. And one of the things we invested very early was a fake news checking mechanism and making sure that these stories are unbiased in nature. So you get both sides of the story, which is where we kind of overlap with journalistic stories, right? Because when you see these stories, you're able to see this amazing fake news checking mechanism and fact checking mechanism that has been ingrained into not only just us, but the creators, right? And when you say unbiased, like when you submit a story to Plug, it's not rejected, but it's only just one point of an opinion. You really get to look at the other point of opinion where your story is, you're asked to rework on your story simply as a creator, where it doesn't go on the site until you actually get the other side of the story. So that really overlaps in journalism, which is why a lot of the stories that we've done have gone on broadcast channels, be it Channel News Asia to NDTV. A lot of these platforms put up stories which are ready-made in nature, and they get that guarantee as well. And it does have a very massive impact on journalism when it comes to the creator community as well. The trend that has started, especially after the lockdown, you see a lot of journalists who had lost their jobs are now getting into content creation on YouTube, Instagram, and they're becoming content creators themselves where they want to start telling news and tell stories on their own, right? A lot of the production people are getting jobs in all kinds of organizations, but you're seeing this birth of new kind of creators coming from the media industry, even at scale now because of the lockdown one that happened, right? So that's something that has been an interesting shift that has happened. I think when we look at our recognition, see, the problem with Pluck as a whole team, the 16 of us, is we are like the underdogs. That's what we call ourselves, right? We constantly focusing on work, and we really rarely talk about ourselves, right? Until someone discovers a story and they do a story on themselves, like this podcast, right? So I'm really happy we're doing this. And the recognition initially in the first year, I remember going and talking to a lot of people about how the creator economy is going to change in about 3 years. Everybody's like, okay, so is your content going to travel? How many people do you have? Is this political in nature? Is this not political? And you get all these conversations from investors, VCs, brands, to a point where now you see the power of how the creator economy has evolved. That recognition took a long, long time for us, right? Even because we've focused on creators so much and like making sure we're servicing the creators. It's only in the last 6 months that we're focusing a lot on talking about what we do because creator economy is here. Globally, it is going to be one of the biggest industries on gig economy is going to start, right? So it's a very interesting journey we've had when it comes to recognition, and Van Infra definitely was a big moment for us.
When I look at the kind of content on Plug TV, I was just recently spending some time looking at the content. There is a film which is on why does Bihar flood, another one on how a toilet changed the community in Sikkim, or how environmentalists in Bombay and Maharashtra are against the coastal road, which will create a problem for the marine life there, or how the street art pieces empowering transgender communities. It's a very vibrant set of content. And when I look at this content, these are all of extremely high quality, right? These are not user generated content and the kind of shot on phone sort of quality that you associate with it. They might still be shot on phone, but the way they've been produced, the impact of that is as good as anything else I've seen in the documentary space on the internet. How are you able to deliver premium content on this platform, especially since a lot of them are individual creators and also creators who don't have access to a lot of means?
Hmm.
And how are you also building discoverability for this great array of content? Maybe we start with
Got it.
the quality of production first.
Definitely. I think we really went on the tech side of the platform late. We spent about 2 years in perfecting a creator ecosystem, right? When Plug started, we used to get a lot of UGC content, which is user generated content, raw in nature. And we actually, when you are a Plug creator, when you log on to the platform now, you actually have a 24/7 production team supporting you to build better content. And at the same time, in a lot of cases, we help them produce it themselves, right? So it becomes a Plug original, right? Where you are able to not, if you have a series idea, if you have an episode idea, you can get that high production value by just being on the platform, using the editing tools that we have. I think after the lockdown, we also started something which was we were very excited about called Plug Studio, where you can book studios in various cities and you're able to get access to a high quality environment at a very low cost, right? And well, obviously, we had to now in the lockdown too, we had to shut it down again. But it was exciting to see the demand that rose for it, right? So we have a production team, and obviously we're mojos, right? We've learned a lot of things from mobile journalism, which becomes mobile storytelling, right? Which is the Jugaad way of production. And over the years, we've learned and experimented with storytelling so much that we're able to do this, right? We are able to even crack a point where we have augmented reality creators joining Plug now to learn AR and to be able to build their own augmented reality stuff. So once the ecosystem was perfected, we were able to really see how a creator should only think about a story, right? On Plug
Hmm.
creators, if we listen to a lot of the audio interviews that we've taken of creators of what really changed their life, one of the most common things was that they got production support as fast as they can. They could focus on their story. And our creators wake up in the morning and they look at a story every time they get out of their house because they're like, oh, wow, why is this old man sitting on the pavement? What is his story? So this is the behavior change we've seen within creators, right? And expanded to a reason once they catch on to an issue or a series, they really break it down. Another opportunity which we really helped give was if you have a series idea and your series is ongoing, but you want someone to contribute like a specific episode from another country, which is one of the things from another city or a country, you can simply click a button and contribute an episode, and the production team helps you do that, right? And one of the stories you mentioned was how a toilet changed someone's life. That was it's such a beautiful experience how that series came about. The series is made by about 8 different creators located in Sikkim, UP, smaller villages in Punjab, various areas, and they all came together and it formed a series called Swachh Bharat Stories, right? Where one episode you see is the goal was to see if toilets are really working, right? If they're really changing lives for women. And it was amazing to see how those toilet stories are so powerful, not only in just one district, but in various districts. And we've seen that trend happen. Once the creators get financial independence and the confidence to be able to create content that they're doing, it just goes really, really far.
I just wanted to shift gears and talk to you about Let Me Breathe .in.
Yeah.
What led you to that particular? What led you in that particular direction? It's not, of course, unobvious for someone who lives in Delhi. I think all of us go through those 60 to 90 days in a year where the air pretty much becomes unusable. But what was it that prompted you to sort of go in that direction? The reason I'm asking is because until now we were talking about the creator ecosystem, but as far as Let Me Breathe is concerned, I think there are decision makers as well who are part of that platform, right? Can
Yes.
you talk to us
Yes.
about that a little bit?
So I think again, when you look at it, this is when Delhi first, even before all policies on air pollution or such a hubba was there on air pollution, when people started witnessing visually air pollution, right, where they couldn't breathe, they could see smog, they could taste the air, they could taste all the stuff that comes in the air, they were getting paranoid, right? People were like, what do I do? The amount of diseases that must be coming in. I'm breathing this. And you could see across all platforms that people were only talking about problems and they were scared. So when we started Let Me Breathe, the idea was to see how we can connect problems and solutions on air pollution. and really see how we can get experts and connect them to citizens, right? Over the course of time, we've had to expand to a lot more issues on climate change, sustainability, veganism, to plastics, to a lot of issues. And we've started seeing how Let Me Breathe is a platform for collective action, right? Because that's what we started it as. When we connect experts to people who are having problems and they have data to identify those problems, they can actually reach out to decision makers and have a solution, a much solution oriented conversation, and see a more balanced outcome of the maybe the resistance or the issue or the solution they have. And we were able to see and gather a massive community in the first 12 months of Let Me Breathe, because air pollution was a visible issue. And post that, we actually saw a lot of people who started sharing stories on how they're planting a forest, to making products on sustainability, to a lot of new range of entrepreneurs coming in, to the electric vehicle revolution that you're seeing right now. And we were able to build this narrative because Let Me Breathe doesn't take sides, right? It only is on the side of a better future and environment. So if you're
Mm.
having an amazing solar campaign, Let Me Breathe is your perfect community. Be it you're either the citizens or you're like a collective group of citizens, which is including the government and stuff. Where now we've seen that collective action is something that everybody wants, right? So we've seen a lot of decision makers, like let's say Mr. Prakash Javadekar to Mr. Aditya Thackeray, who participated in a lot of live sessions that Let Me Breathe organizes in their city, or according to a situation that comes, be it a World Environment Day, World Earth Day. A lot of politicians have, and a lot of decision makers have start engaging, right? So when
Mm.
I think politicians wouldn't be a correct thing to say, because we have corporate decision makers who have also engaged with us, who belong to companies like Mr. Vijay Shekhar Sharma as well, right? Who want to come and share their side of the story and find a solution which is troubling everyone. And we've seen some amazing results around it. I think one of the first successes that Let Me Breathe had through one of his stories was, we were covering a story on air pollution, how a lot of people, like, I think along with creators, we used to go on ground then, because we really wanted to experience how this ecosystem could work. And we were doing this story where we were following women in Halaswa, right? And to see how they are surviving air pollution, if they have basic awareness of how masks work. And as soon while we were traveling and while we were walking with them, we had a bunch of men in the same village who started saying, I know how a mask works. So he started wearing a surgical mask to protect himself from air pollution. And seeing that, right, people realize that a lot of these communities don't have access or knowledge to what kind of mask to wear.
And you're talking about a pre-pandemic world, isn't it?
Yeah. At a point of time where masks were like not important at all. Masks weren't like our nose or ear,
Mm.
right? Masks were
Mm. Mm.
only to protect yourself from air pollution, or if you're a doctor, right? And we realized something amazing after the story went viral, which means like a lot of people started relating to the story. People started a crowdfunding campaign, and a local decision maker was involved by one of the nonprofits who was working there, to give those masks to the people. And it was such an amazing participatory thing to see, that organically people started a crowdfunding campaign to give masks to the women and to the lot of people in the village. And then you had a decision maker who was like, oh wow, I should engage and give these masks, because these are already crowdfunded. But what we realized later on is, when we divided the amount of stories we were getting on climate change, pollution, plastics, and connected city level decision makers. So, for example, we realized we were able to get all political parties to come together for those sessions, right? So, for example, in Bombay, you had Mr. Aditya Thackeray, Mr. Milind Deora, and someone from Aam Aadmi Party, who all came together to discuss pressing issues of RA, pressing issues of air pollution, and where air pollution is headed towards in Bombay. And to a point where even like smaller cities like Varanasi, you saw active political participation from all political parties, be it BJP, Congress, and all these people came together to discuss pressing issues, either before elections or either on important days, or either when there was a big crisis happening, environmental crisis in their own city. And they were able to find a due course of solution and move forward.
What are your favorite shows or series, whatever you call it? What are your favorites on Flack? Talk to us about one or two of them.
My two current favorites are, I think one is the story. We have this new series which we've launched about a couple of weeks ago called Behind the Art, which actually explores how an artist's inspiration works. So you have these artists who are not attached to any big museums, not attached to any big agencies, and they want to tell their stories. And I'm loving the way they're creating these stories, because they're using animation, they're using their own voice to express. and breaking the standard protocols that a short form video or a video has. And they're able to tell these stories in such amazing ways, not only just targeting users in India, they're able to target global users and talk about the art process. And the second story that I'm in love with, we're obviously in a pandemic, right? And Plug has about 2,000 creators who are health creators. Okay, this is my favorite part, right? I'm seeing doctors who are hesitant to even do a tweet on social media. They are telling stories which are getting millions and millions of views across all platforms. And it's in the middle of a pandemic. I think this new story, which we've released very recently, where Dr. Sparsh is talking about how you need to get vaccine, he shows you the whole process in a hospital and you're
Wow.
totally hooked on to doing it, right? And it's amazing to see health creators. And because doctors were the biggest challenge that we've faced when we were enabling communities, right? And now they're the need of the hour. Every doctor is heard from a credible voice. And if you're able to establish it as your social identity, not only on Plug TV, but on every platform, it's amazing. And these stories are going on government channels, these stories are going on various platforms because these are credible voices who are able to churn premium content, which is credible and fact check in nature so fast. And I can name like a lot of popular stories. We have Testing Sahi Hai, which is really talked about, which focused on stories on how testing saved families, to vaccines, why vaccines are important. We have Verified, which is a show on fact checking. And recently we've launched COVID recovery stories, where we're talking to patients on how successfully they recovered. And we have doctors who are talking about how vaccines work and continuously helping you virtually, really in your COVID journey as well. And it's amazing to see how the platform's coming in handy with creators who would never imagine they would be influencing at this stage, for sure.
I want to quickly talk about this journey purely as an entrepreneur. Talk to us a little bit about how much of your own money you invested in this, how much capital did you start Plug TV with, and how it is doing as an organization, and where are you in the entire investment seeking journey?
When I started off Pluck, I only had 25,000 rupees saved from my pocket. And I was able to convince one person that this would work, right? And these were two assets that I had. And going about 3.5 years later, we were a team of 16 people who are amazing in their own thing. We have AR people who are into AR creators. We have a massive training team. We have an amazing production team who supports creators all the time. We have a really, really unique tech team. We have a team which only focuses on design thinking. And all our team members are underdogs, right? People who believe in making sure this can become an amazing company, right? And when I look at it from a vision, I think in about 3 years, I see about at least 2 million creators using Plug TV constantly. I want every storyteller, whenever they leave their home and they find a story, the first thing they want to do is structure it quickly and they can upload it quickly on Plug TV and goes on to various platforms and they earn their revenue. They continuously keep doing that, right? To be able to do that really, really efficiently and fast. When it comes to investors, Plug as a company is still bootstrapped, right? We've grown really fast and we will continue to grow really fast. We're in the middle of conversations with a few investors, but like I mentioned earlier, a lot of investors are still building their thesis on creator economy.
Are you revenue positive today?
Oh, yes. I think what I would like to say is we're revenue positive and profitable at
Wow.
the same time. Yeah. And it's really on the structural and the learnings that I've had in the past about how to make sure you build various parts of the businesses efficiently in a cost which really benefits everyone, and using a philosophy of making sure that the team is engaged. And I think I'm lucky because we have a brilliant team of people who really believe in the vision, who really go all out to do this, right? I'll just give an example. About six creators, just three, I think about a day or two ago, when a lot of Delhi is constantly looking for oxygen cylinders, right? Constantly wanting to do it. Just this is just to give an example of how creator economy and creator enabling works for us, right? And a lot of people are getting scammed while they're purchasing oxygen cylinders. About 6 to 7 creators got together and they did this investigation themselves to see how they can catch their scammers. This is not a media organization. We don't do journalism, right? We were able to do that investigation, and now it's leading to so many people coming out and stopping the scam and changing the way people verify oxygen cylinders. And it was amazing to see this, right? So this is the culture that Plug comes with, where it's constant enabling and constant learning. And when it comes to growing forward, even being revenue positive, I think these are things which we're very happy and strongly feel that it's going to continue happening, because the amount of brands who want to build their own creative communities, who want new kind of content. And let's not forget the amount of content platforms which are taking birth in this country and across the world. They need newer creators and amazing content that needs to constantly flow. Yeah.
I'm still sort of reeling from the fact that for an organization like Pluck, where you support over 31,000 creators today, and you rely on sort of content syndication and ad revenues you make from other platforms, plus brands and organizations who are investing in your own platform, you're actually able to support this ecosystem and still be revenue positive.
Yeah,
right? That is a stunning achievement. But from here onwards, right, as you move forward, how do you plan to scale? Are you planning to seek a round of investment from private equity, or what are you thinking?
definitely. I think, Karthik, one of the things which really worked for me as an entrepreneur was earlier, really early in the organization, we focused on strengthening our B2B section really strong, which is making sure that brands have a constant supply, and that demand and supply between brands and institutions is constantly there. So one of the reasons why our key to success has been a very strong B2B that we have within the company. And when it comes to scaling it and seeing really go forward, one of the things that we're really focusing on is acquiring a lot more creators and acquiring a lot more content that's coming in. And obviously building and increasing the tech that we have. And we have a few ideas which we really want to implement. And when it comes to seeking around, yes, I mean, I think we're at a stage now where we're seeking investment to scale at the speed that we want to scale. Not only in India, but at the same time looking at countries which really need this. And I know that we've already had a demand of creator economy platforms like us from Hong Kong, from Africa, from UK. A lot of people want these communities, right, which are not serviced by anyone. It's like the projected market size is about 50 million creators will join this economy. And only 22,000 of them, like you mentioned, YouTubes and the Instagrams are being serviced. There's a huge market which has been tapped for us.
Headroom is just amazing, isn't it? Yeah. Great. Tamseel, thank you so much for being on the show. Wishing you and Plug TV and all your other endeavors a lot of success.
Karthik, thank you so much for letting me be on the show. It's been a great opportunity as well. And I really love listening to all your podcasts. So it's great to be on this as well.
Thanks so much. If you like that episode, do subscribe to the show on any of the platforms you listen to podcasts from. If you're intrigued by Tamseel's story, do look up plug.tv, that is PLUC.tv. You can also follow Tamseel on Twitter at Tamseel_H, that is TAMSEEL_H. You can follow me on Twitter at _Karthik, that is Karthik with an H. You can also follow me on Instagram at filter_coffee, and that is coffee with a K.
I hope you enjoyed that show. If you aren't following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We'd like to thank our sponsors on the network this week, Cred, Siet, TheWholeTruthFoods.com, and PayPal. We really do appreciate the support. On Cyrus Says, we discussed quite a bit about the local assembly elections this month. Vasanti Hariprakash was there to talk about the West Bengal elections, and then we also spoke to Pradeep Gupta, a psephologist and author. He's the chairman and MD of Access My India. Do definitely check that episode out. Great conversation. Tune into This Round Is On Me, where Gauri Devi Dayal caught up on the latest trends in the PR industry with Archana Jain from PR Pundit. On The Habit Coach, Ashton Doctor spoke to Anandita Chatterjee. She's the founder of Travel Chatter. She's been a marketer with some large firms and has traveled to 67 countries so far. It was a RuPaul Drag Race fan club on KBCD where Farhad and Sunetro discussed the show's best moments and talents. Amber Rana was joined by celebrity fitness trainer Shivoham on Know Your Kanun to discuss fitness laws and regulations in India. They talk about the laws and infrastructure that exist to protect gyms, trainers, and also consumers in the fitness industry. And on the note with Maruk Inayat, we have clinical psychologist and friend of the network, Sonali Gupta. She talks about ongoing mental health issues like survivor's guilt, coping with anxiety around the pandemic, and doom scrolling. And with that, we hope to see you again next week.
If you love cricket, listen up. The Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast is here for you. Hosted by DJ, Varun, and me, Ashwin, we bring a fun, fresh fan's point of view to talking all things cricket. Sometimes it's just the three of us, sometimes we have guests, including current and former international cricketers. For new episodes every week, check out the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast on the IVM app, website, or wherever you get your podcasts.